Our Black delegates of Black Affairs Council have now left the room. They have left this assembly and they have left our movement. The assembly is returning to business as usual and the position of Black people at the back of the bus. This is how deeply that was felt. Well, recently, with the rise of hate crimes in this country and even recognizing our own subtle racism in our denomination, it has reopened this chapter of our denomination's history. We want to face it. We want to deal with it. We want to heal it. That's what we want to do. We want to repair the chalice. Our denomination has asked us to set aside this day to give voice to our Black Unitarian Universalist brothers and sisters to hear what they have to say about how racism exists for them in this country and even here in our churches at times. And you are invited this morning to open your heart and your minds to listen, to help repair that chalice that has been broken. We've got a series of 3 readings. In between, we'll have songs. Then afterwards, we've created a lovely ritual that we can move forward and repair in this denomination.
Everybody Else by Jabari S. Jones. On a spring day in Farmington, Maine, I was walking to a store. I made my way through a line of cars that were waiting for a light, and in front of me was a large Confederate flag flying from the back of a white pickup truck. I crossed the street, not looking at who was driving the truck, and went into the store. As I went about my business, I felt stunned, uncomfortable. Asking me to respect that person's right to fly that flag and shrug it off like everybody else. What she failed to see, or perhaps ignored in a gesture of color blindness wrapped in the First Amendment, is that I am not like everybody else who walks in the shadow of that flag. I am from away. My hair is coarse. My skin is dark brown. I am a Black man in Maine. In so many ways, I am not like everybody else around here. But I want to belong here. In so many ways, that flag represents the denial of my rights, my belonging. It is impossible for me to blend in, to hide my Black body, to not let it get to me. I don't have the privilege of hiding from history because I'm conscious I know what it is. I know its name. It rides in the back of a pickup truck. It proudly stalks around town like an alpha predator. It clings to me like a nightmare while it seems like everyone else is walking through a dream. I point at the thing and say, "Look," and the crowd replies, "Yes, but." When I hear the yes, I feel heard. When I hear the but, I become invisible. My life doesn't matter. It's this but, this disbelief in the truth of Black bodies, this tolerance for something that is ugly and intolerant, that is the terror that everybody else allows to walk in their midst. A casual terror that I cannot escape any more than I can escape my own body, my own consciousness. A terror that makes all lives matter less. I struggle to wake up from the nightmare and the dream that is its mirror image. I struggle to make my life matter, for Black lives to matter, so that all lives will matter. This morning, I invite us all, in a spirit of meditation, to consider how yes, but might feel and what we might do differently if we encounter such an event.
Join us in the response. We forgive ourselves
Our next reading is written by the Director of Finance and Operations at one of our largest churches up in Seattle, Washington, called East Shore. He wrote this actually just back in October for a newsletter, in their newsletter. For those who do not know me, I am of Indian ethnicity, brown-skinned. Over the past several months, several congregants have asked me if I've experienced racism at East Shore. I answered yes. I have also heard some congregants say that they do not believe that racism exists at East Shore, and they themselves already know all about racism because they learned about it so many years ago. First, Shore, the potential of what this community can become, to model what we want to see in the world. The values of East Shore, the principles of our Unitarian Universalist faith, the step-by-step progress of a congregation intent on growing, learning, and modeling racial justice. This is a great foundation to build upon. This is not easy work. And as the saying goes, nothing worth doing ever is. This equality does not happen overnight, nor with one great guest speaker. It will take years of consistent dedication to the work. Please do not deny reality. Embrace it, learn from it, and join me in shaping a just future. So I know that everybody here is a good person. I think of myself as a good person. But sometimes we can put our foot in our mouths. And I'll give you an example. Just my first couple of weeks here, for the first time, I met David Nunez, who is our sexton. He and his wife, they set up our things here. They're janitors, and they all clean and everything like that. They're wonderful people. When I met David, David had for me an accent. I didn't know what that accent was, so I asked David, "So, where are you from?" He looked at me rather oddly, and I said, where do you come from? And he said, East LA. I was like, oh, okay, excuse me while I take the foot out of my mouth. Because this is the thing, so like, well, is that racism? Well, a person of a different skin color, he is Hispanic, with a different accent, therefore isn't American, right? Has to be from someplace else. That's a subtle, unconscious form of racism. And I know I'm a good person, but I also know I make mistakes. And I'm here today to try and to learn from them. And that's all any of us can do. So I invite you this morning in that spirit of meditation, again, to think back on those times when consciously or unconsciously you might have done something that was this microaggression or outright racism. And how might you respond now? And can you forgive yourself or others and learn from the experience? Please join me in a moment of silence.
Forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. We forgive ourselves and each other.
Our next reading is by Kimberly Quinn Johnson, and it opens with a poem by Barbara A. Holmes. It's called Black Joy. Joy unspeakable is not silent. It moans, hums, and bends to the rhythm of the dancing universe. For our free African ancestors, joy unspeakable is drum talk. For enslaved Africans during the Middle Passage, joy unspeakable is surprise in living one more day. For Africans in bondage in the Americas, joy unspeakable is the moment of mystical encounter when God tiptoes into the hushed arbor. Joy unspeakable is humming how I got over after swimming safely to the other shore of a swollen Ohio River when you know that you can't swim. When theologian Barbara A. Holmes talks about unspeakable joy, she's talking specifically about how the contemplative practices of the Black church have sustained Black people in America through suffering and survival. More than referring to a particular church or denomination, this experience is collective and transhistorical. It is also a different expression of Black religion than I'm expected to exhibit as a Black woman. On more than one occasion, I've had a particular Black mode of worship projected onto me, the more charismatic modes of Black worship that we're so familiar with, the shout, the stomp, the song. That particular style of Black worship sometimes strikes me as a caricature of joy, a shallow stereotype. I see this in the expectation that more Black worship will bring more lively singing, more rhythmic clapping, more energetic worship. The shout, the stomp, the song. But this caricature, this stereotype, is a narrow sliver of the complexity and the richness of Black spirituality and Black worship. The modes of Black spirituality that are most powerful, nourishing, and nurturing for me aren't the stomp, shout, or song. Instead, I think of the rock, the sway, the bend, the moan, the hum. And I think of these things done in community. I marvel that in the midst of sadness and sorrow, in the midst of feeling the effects of generations of trauma wrought by racism and white supremacy, we can still find joy with each other. I call it Black joy because I am Black, and it is the joy that I have been familiar with my whole life. It is the joy that I have learned from Black people. It is joy created through our collective healing, our laying down of burdens to be picked up and shared by our people, our community. This is not in spite of suffering, a mask to put on to hide the pain, an armor to put on to push through the pain. This is an embrace, holding and soothing us in our suffering. This Black joy is joy created through our being together. This Black joy reminds me that I am not alone, that trouble don't always last, that I am held and carried forward by a power beyond what I can comprehend. I call it Black joy, but I want to offer it, to the extent it is mine to offer, to this faith. One of my gifts to Unitarian Universalism is the suggestion that joy is ours. We are the people who commit to justice, equity, and compassion. We are the people who aspire to world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. We are the people who affirm our interdependence with each other and the universe. I want to challenge Unitarian Universalism and Unitarian Universalists to claim joy. Unitarian Universalist joy will require a different way of imagining ourselves and a different way of being with each other. Claiming the possibility of Unitarian Universalist joy requires making space for the surprise that Holmes describes. Claiming the possibility of Unitarian Universalist joy requires slowing down to hear the talk of the drum, pausing to move to the rhythms of the drum. Unitarian Universalist joy requires opening to the possibility of the mystical encounter. Unitarian Universalist joy requires embodying this faith differently than many of us are accustomed to. That ends our reading. This morning I invite us all in a spirit of meditation to consider how we might claim the joy that this writer speaks of. What can we do to open our hearts to Unitarian Universalist joy?
so we begin again. We're not going to solve racism here in this country here today, but we're going to start repairing. We're at that crossroads that we were 50 years ago, because right now there is another Black caucus within the Unitarian Universal Association. It's called BLUU, or Black Lives of Unitarian Universalists. It was formed just about a year ago, in 2016, as a way of supporting Black Unitarian Universalists in this predominantly white denomination, making sure that Black voices are heard and not stifled. So we have this moment here. We can kind of hem and haw and go, well, I didn't break it. Why do I have to do it? Or we can assume that we are the ones who are now going to move forward and help with that healing. So this morning, Carrie and I invite you into a ritual of commitment that we do try to do what we can, even just in our daily lives, our churches here, to combat racism. What we've created, here you want to show, here is our broken chalice. We're going to perform a little singuni. What is it? Is that how I pronounce it? Singuni. We're going to repair our chalice. Words of challenge. What do you think it's going to take to help repair in our hearts and our churches and the wounds of this country? I want you to think of a word, a phrase, a symbol that embodies what you believe we need.
Empathy.
So you find your word. I invite you to come up around here to write it on one of our shards, and Carrie will help you place it. gorgeous. I see words like hope, truth, I will believe you. Listen deeply, courage, le humble. How is it for you? Listen with love, share stories, care, hugs, look with love, renew, all sorts of wonderful things. I'm going to leave this up here. Thank you all. Thank you all for helping rebuild and repair our chalice. May we live to see a day when we are whole, as a church, as a denomination, and as a country. I wish that for us all.